As spring approached, the ice and snow receded, revealing the hidden contours of Vinland's coastline once more. Leif Ericson, having overseen the meticulous gathering of timber, preserved food and grapevines, stood at the edge of the Nar, gazing at the forests that stretched inland and the rivers that had fed his men for months. Every moment on this land had been etched into memory. The smell of pine mingled with the ocean breeze, the vivid green of fertile meadows, and the purple stain of wild grapes plucked by eager hands. Yet despite the beauty and promise, prudence dictated that the time for departure had arrived. The crew, numbering 35, approached the Nar with a mixture of excitement and melancholy. They had faced harsh weather, learned the rhythms of new rivers and forests, and encountered the Skraelings, whose presence reminded them that Vinland was not empty, nor easily claimed. Supplies were stowed carefully. Barrels of salted fish, smoked meats, and bundles of timber were lashed securely to the deck. Grapevines were wrapped to protect roots, intended as living proof of the land's bounty. Every item carried spoke to the dual purpose of this voyage, survival and testimony. The Nar, steady and robust, seemed almost reluctant to leave, as if understanding that its next voyage would bridge memory and home, carrying stories as cargo alongside timber and provisions. Leif organized the departure with military precision. Scouts surveyed the surrounding woods one last time, ensuring no Skraeling ambushes threatened the embarkation. Watch rotations had kept men vigilant throughout the winter, and now those systems guided the final preparations. Each man had a role, securing sails, checking rigging, positioning oars, and managing cargo. The disciplined efficiency of the crew reflected lessons learned in Greenland and Iceland, where survival demanded more than courage. It required strategy, foresight, and cohesion. The first day of departure was calm, the Atlantic mirror-like in its tranquility, a stark contrast to the ferocious storms the crew had endured on the way west. Yet Leif remained vigilant. The sea had been both a road and a test. Its waters, vast and mercurial, demanded respect. Navigation relied upon sun, stars, and instincts honed over years of North Atlantic voyaging. For many aboard the Nar, this crossing was both a physical journey and a mental reflection, a time to internalize the triumphs and trials of their brief sojourn in Vinland. As the coast faded into the horizon, Leif reflected on the human dimensions of exploration. The Skraelings, enigmatic and wary, had shaped the Norse understanding of occupation and coexistence. Trade, initially promising, had faltered. Cautious observation had replaced casual interaction. Conflict, though limited in scale, underscored the realities of settlement in an inhabited land. Every arrow fired, every miscommunication, and every encounter taught the crew that exploration was inseparable from diplomacy and strategy. The wealth of forests and rivers could not substitute for numbers, alliances, and careful social navigation. The Nar's crew shared stories aloud, turning the journey into a living record. Tales of hunting, fishing, and the discovery of grapevines intertwined with accounts of skirmishes, narrow escapes, and lessons learned. These narratives served both as a reminder of challenges overcome and as instruction for future generations who might follow in the footsteps of Leif Ericson. For every young Norseman listening, the story of Vinland offered more than adventure. It offered knowledge, caution, and inspiration. The crossing itself was not without hardship. Spring storms approached swiftly from the north, whipping the waves into white crests and threatening the Nar's progress. The men labored tirelessly, adjusting the sail, bailing water, and navigating through shifting currents. Even in these trials, the memories of Vinland's forests, rivers, and fertile land motivated them. Each stroke of the oar and adjustment of the rigging was fueled by the knowledge that their journey had secured proof of lands unknown to the wider world, a testament to Norse seafaring skill and daring. As the Atlantic stretched endlessly, conversations aboard the Nar turned reflective. Leif spoke to his men about the importance of memory and storytelling. "Vinland is more than a place," he said. "It is proof that our reach extends beyond the horizon, that courage and ingenuity are rewarded, and that every voyage carries lessons as precious as any timber or food we bring home." Men nodded, understanding that the true treasure of this expedition was knowledge itself, the awareness of what lay beyond Greenland, and the possibility that human endeavor could shape the edges of the known world. Weeks passed. Days blended into nights, stars guiding their path north and east. The crew maintained their routines, balancing work with observation, ensuring that the Na remained on course and supplies preserved. Fatigue was constant, yet morale was buoyed by shared purpose and the intimate awareness of history unfolding under their hands. Leif himself remained vigilant, not only as captain but as chronicler in his mind, cataloguing details for recounting back in Greenland and Iceland. At last, the familiar coastlines of Greenland emerged from the morning mist. Relief, anticipation, and pride mingled among the crew. They had crossed the Atlantic twice, survived unknown waters, and returned with proof of new lands and abundant resources. Timber, smoked meats, and grapevines were evidence of Vinland's fertility. Yet more than material gain, the Na carried a weight of stories, experiences, and lessons in navigation, survival, and interaction with native peoples. Upon arrival, the Na was greeted with curiosity and admiration. Leif and his crew recounted their journey, describing the landscapes, rivers, forests, and encounters with the Skraelings. Timber would be distributed for construction, grapevines planted for observation, and preserved food shared. But it was the stories, the vivid first-hand accounts, that captured imagination, cementing Vinland's place in Norse consciousness. For those who listened, Vinland became both legend and tangible reality, a land beyond the familiar, reachable yet fraught with complexity. The sagas emphasized that the return journey was not merely a conclusion, but an integration of experience into the collective memory of Norse society. The wealth of Vinland, timber, grapes, and fish, was less significant than the strategic and cultural knowledge gained. Every observation about Skraeling behavior, seasonal patterns, and resource distribution would inform future expeditions and influence decisions about settlement attempts. Leif's leadership ensured that the expedition's achievements would resonate across generations, shaping the narrative of Norse exploration and ambition. Leif's account, preserved in the Greenlander's Saga and the Saga of Eric the Red, captures both triumph and limitation. Vinland was rich and fertile, offering resources unavailable in Iceland and Greenland, yet it remained contested, its settlement constrained by population, logistics, and indigenous resistance. The Norse learned that discovery alone was insufficient for permanent occupation. Caution, diplomacy, and adaptability were as crucial as courage and strength. Part 11 closes with reflection. The Na, having delivered its crew safely back to Greenland, symbolized more than a vessel. It represented the human capacity for exploration, adaptation, and memory. Vinland's shores, though briefly occupied, had extended the mental and physical horizons of Norse society. The legacy of the journey would inspire future generations, preserving a vision of the Atlantic as a road, not a barrier, and reinforcing the enduring human drive to seek, to know, and to survive in lands unknown. The return to Greenland did not mark the end of Vinland's story. Rather, it was the beginning of a legacy that would ripple across generations. Leif Ericson's men, though weary from the arduous voyage, carried with them more than timber, smoked meats, and grapevines. They carried knowledge about geography, navigation, survival, and most importantly, the limits of Norse expansion. This wealth of experience became a silent teacher, instructing future explorers on both the promise and the perils of new lands. In the settlements of Greenland, word of Vinland spread quickly. Farmers, hunters and traders gathered around hearths, listening in awe to the accounts of lush forests, fertile soil, rivers brimming with salmon, and vineyards heavy with fruit. These descriptions painted Vinland not as a distant myth, but as a tangible reality, an extension of the Norse world. Yet alongside admiration came caution. The skirmishes with the Skrælings served as stark reminders that even the bravest of men could not conquer lands already inhabited. Survival depended not only on skill and courage, but also on prudence, diplomacy, and the ability to read the intentions of others. Leif himself became both a storyteller and a strategist. He chronicled not only the triumphs, the discovery of grapevines and abundant timber, but also the challenges. He detailed the hazards of the North Atlantic, the nuances of interacting with native peoples, and the logistical demands of sustaining a settlement far from the established communities of Iceland and Greenland. These narratives were vital. They transformed Vinland from a fleeting voyage into a blueprint for understanding lands beyond known boundaries. The Greenlanders, inspired by these accounts, began to imagine possibilities that transcended survival. Vinland offered timber for construction, wild grapes for cultivation, and fertile land that could, in theory, support new families. Yet the Norse were practical. They recognized that without sufficient numbers, alliances, and knowledge of indigenous societies, permanent settlement was a risk fraught with danger. Thus, Vinland was seen as a resource-rich outpost, valuable for its goods, but precarious as a colony. Trade became a key focus. Timber and other materials from Vinland could supplement Greenland's limited resources, enhancing construction, shipbuilding, and even exports. Grapes and other wild fruits offered both nourishment and novelty. Leif's careful organization of cargo ensured that these goods arrived intact, allowing Greenlanders to experiment with new food sources and materials. In essence, Vinland became a laboratory of abundance, a test case for what lay beyond familiar shores. Yet the psychological impact of Vinland was perhaps even more profound. The knowledge that the Atlantic could be crossed and lands reached expanded the Norse mental map. Horizons were no longer bounded by ice, fjords, or familiar coastlines. The Atlantic became a road, not a barrier, and the dream of distant lands entered the collective imagination. For younger generations, tales of Vinland ignited curiosity and ambition, planting seeds for future exploration, trade, and settlement attempts. The sagas preserved these lessons meticulously. The Greenlanders' Saga and the Saga of Eric the Red captured the voyage-esque narrative in both triumph and caution. They emphasized the ingenuity of Norse seafaring, the bravery required to face unknown seas, and the delicate balance between ambition and survival. These stories ensured that Vinland remained a reference point for what lay beyond, shaping the ethos of Norse exploration for centuries. Leif's leadership set a precedent. He demonstrated that discovery was inseparable from responsibility. Returning alive with both goods and knowledge was a triumph equal to any conquest. The crew's survival, strategic decision-making, and careful documentation highlighted the Norse understanding that exploration required more than physical courage. It required foresight, planning, and respect for the limits of human endeavor. Even as Vinland receded from immediate memory, its symbolic significance endured. Timber cut from its forests found its way into Greenlandic homes and ships, while grapevines planted in experimental plots became living reminders of what had been achieved. These physical artifacts, coupled with the oral and written accounts, ensured that Vinland remained present in the Norse consciousness, a testament to the possibilities of daring and ingenuity. Interactions with the Skrælings also offered enduring lessons. The initial curiosity, followed by mistrust and conflict, highlighted the complexities of encountering indigenous populations. The Norse learned that power, technology, and audacity could not guarantee peaceful coexistence. Understanding, diplomacy, and caution were as vital as the sword. These lessons, though hard-earned, would inform future expeditions, influencing how Norsemen approached unknown peoples in distant lands. Over time, Vinland's narrative transformed into legend. For some, it became a story of adventure and abundance. For others, a cautionary tale about the limits of ambition. The duality of experience, success in discovery, failure in settlement, imbued Vinland with a depth that mere conquest could not provide. It stood as both inspiration and warning, shaping perceptions of exploration in Norse society and beyond. Generations later, when European exploration entered the historical record, Vinland's memory provided context. The Norse had crossed the Atlantic, reached new continents, and returned with knowledge and resources. Though these achievements were largely confined to Icelandic and Greenlandic oral and literary traditions, for centuries they preserved the notion that human endeavor could stretch across oceans, that the world was vaster than previously imagined, and that exploration carried both promise and peril. In essence, Vinland's legacy was twofold: material and conceptual. Materially, it supplied timber, grapes, and other resources to Greenland, enhancing the community's capacity and prosperity. Conceptually, it expanded the mental and cultural horizons of Norse society, embedding the understanding that distant lands could be reached, studied, and, under the right circumstances, settled. It underscored the balance between courage and caution, ambition and pragmatism, reminding all that survival and success required both daring and wisdom. The voyage to and from Vinland thus became a touchstone in Norse history. It exemplified the resilience, adaptability, and ingenuity of a people accustomed to harsh climates, unpredictable seas, and uncertain outcomes. Leif Ericson's leadership, the crew's perseverance, and the encounters with both nature and indigenous peoples shaped a narrative that endured far beyond immediate achievement. Vinland, though briefly occupied, left a permanent imprint on Norse exploration, ensuring that the first footsteps of Europe in North America were recorded, remembered, and celebrated. Part 12 closes with a reflection. Vinland was a land of opportunity, danger, and discovery. It was a mirror of the Norse themselves, resilient, resourceful, and restless. The lessons learned, stories told, and memories carried home ensured that Vinland's legacy was not merely a footnote in history, but a foundation upon which future dreams of exploration could be built. In the hearts and minds of those who survived, Vinland remained alive, a symbol of what lies beyond the horizon, waiting for the courage to reach it. The story of Vinland did not vanish with the retreat of Leif Ericson and his men. Rather, it settled into the cultural and psychological fabric of the Norse world, leaving ripples that would influence generations to come. In Greenland, Iceland, and even Norway, tales of lush forests, rivers brimming with salmon, and fertile valleys became subjects of fireside storytelling, shared with children and adults alike. These stories were rich with lessons, emphasizing not only the rewards of boldness, but also the practical wisdom of restraint and survival. Vinland existed in the imagination as much as in reality, a distant, almost mythical place that represented both possibility and the limits of human ambition. For the younger generation of Norsemen, these narratives were formative. Sons of Greenlandic farmers dreamed of crossing the Atlantic, navigating unfamiliar waters, and encountering lands that were both a challenge and a promise. Vinland symbolized the unknown, the excitement of discovery, and the tangible rewards of daring ventures. Yet the sagas were careful to balance wonder with caution. They emphasized that survival required discipline, foresight, and the ability to respect the lands and peoples encountered. Through these stories, Norse culture internalized an ethos of measured bravery, a courage informed by experience and the acknowledgement of risks inherent in expansion. Beyond individual inspiration, Vinland had practical consequences for Norse society. Timber harvested from its forests arrived in Greenland as an invaluable resource, addressing chronic shortages that had plagued settlers for decades. Grapes and other fruits, introduced experimentally, offered new culinary and agricultural possibilities. Even small amounts of Vinland's resources symbolized the potential wealth and sustainability of lands further west. Traders and explorers began to consider the Atlantic not as an insurmountable barrier, but as a network of potential opportunities, connecting distant settlements through the movement of goods, knowledge, and people. The encounter with the Skraelings also left an indelible mark on Norse thought. While the Norse had mastered the seas, the Vinland experience taught them that human landscapes could not be dominated by mere technology or numbers. Diplomacy, negotiation, and cultural sensitivity were as essential as strength and skill. The lessons from these early confrontations resonated in Greenlandic and Icelandic society, shaping how Norse explorers approached interactions with unfamiliar peoples in subsequent journeys. This blend of caution and curiosity would become a hallmark of Norse exploration, adventurous, yet grounded in practical awareness of the challenges posed by new territories. Sagas chronicling Vinland, such as the Greenlanders Saga and the Saga of Eric the Red, preserved these multifaceted lessons. They recorded the physical and logistical achievements, navigation, shipbuilding, and survival, while also delving into human drama, the conflict with the Skraelings, the ethical decisions of leaders, and the communal efforts required to sustain life in a foreign land. These narratives became instructional tools, offering models of leadership, resource management, and the importance of prudence in the face of uncertainty. By embedding moral and practical lessons within stories of adventure, the sagas ensured that Vinland would inform Norse identity for centuries. Over time, Vinland became more than a geographic discovery. It became a symbol of ambition tempered by reality. The Norse understood that even the most fertile and generous lands could not be held by a small force without alliances, planning, and caution. This understanding influenced not only future exploratory ventures, but also domestic strategies for survival in Iceland and Greenland, where harsh environments demanded cooperation, foresight, and adaptation. Vinland's lessons extended into everyday life, reinforcing values that were crucial for communities facing unpredictable climates, scarce resources, and distant trade opportunities. Vinland also inspired future expeditions, though these were often motivated by both curiosity and practicality. Explorers contemplated the possibilities of returning to harvest timber, establish seasonal settlements, or engage in controlled trade with indigenous populations. Each venture built upon the accumulated knowledge of previous voyages, reinforcing the Norse capacity to adapt, innovate, and survive across vast distances. Though permanent colonies in North America never materialized, Vinland became a conceptual touchstone, a measure of what was possible when courage, skill, and prudence intersected. In the broader European context, Vinland remained largely unknown until centuries later, yet its legacy endured in subtle ways. The Norse had crossed the Atlantic, demonstrating the feasibility of transoceanic travel long before the voyages of Columbus or Cabot. Vinland embodied the idea that human endeavor could overcome natural boundaries, that the edge of known maps was not the limit of reality. While the tale was preserved primarily in Icelandic literature and oral tradition, its influence would echo across time, seeding the notion of distant lands awaiting discovery. The stories also reinforced the Norse identity as seafarers, explorers, and pioneers. The Atlantic voyages became emblematic of their resilience, resourcefulness, and willingness to confront uncertainty. Vinland, with its abundant resources and challenging interactions, encapsulated the duality of Norse expansion. the promise of prosperity intertwined with the perils of overreach. This duality shaped cultural narratives, fostering a sense of respect for both nature and human complexity, essential for survival and success in unfamiliar environments. Vinland's impact extended beyond tangible resources and exploration lessons. It shaped imagination, encouraging storytellers, poets, and historians to envision worlds beyond the horizon. Maps, although rudimentary, began to reflect the growing awareness that lands existed across the Western Sea. The concept of Vinland as a fertile, promising, yet contested territory provided a template for understanding exploration as a combination of risk, reward, and human interaction. Future explorers would inherit this framework, blending ambition with strategic caution, inspired by the achievements and limitations of Leif Ericson and his crew. Ultimately, Vinland became a mirror reflecting Norse values: courage tempered by prudence, curiosity balanced with experience, and the recognition that discovery was inseparable from responsibility. Leif Ericson's voyage illustrated that success was not measured solely by conquest, but by survival, learning, and the ability to adapt. Through the sagas, the knowledge of Vinland endured, influencing generations of Norsemen, guiding their approach to the unknown, and embedding a legacy of exploration that extended far beyond the shores of Greenland. Part 13 concludes with reflection on the enduring influence of Vinland, a story of ambition and restraint, of discovery and the wisdom to retreat, of opportunity tempered by reality. It stands as a testament to the spirit of exploration, the lessons of cross-cultural encounters, and the power of knowledge to transcend immediate triumphs, leaving a legacy that shaped both imagination and practical action in Norse society for generations to come. The story of Vinland was not merely a chapter in Norse history, it became a foundation for the broader understanding of the Atlantic world, a conceptual framework for exploration that extended well beyond the shores of Greenland and Iceland. Though the Norse never established a permanent colony in North America, the voyage of Leif Ericson demonstrated the extraordinary reach of human initiative, and it laid the groundwork for centuries of transoceanic navigation, trade, and cultural exchange. For those who remained in the Norse homelands, the narrative of Vinland reinforced the importance of adaptability, ingenuity, and foresight when venturing into unknown territories. In the aftermath of the Vinland expedition, Greenlandic and Icelandic societies reflected deeply on the lessons learned. The Norse realized that discovery alone was insufficient. The sustainability of a settlement required both numbers and alliances. Vinland's promise of fertile soil, abundant timber, and wild grapes contrasted sharply with the realities of defending a small outpost against the indigenous Skrælings. This recognition influenced future planning for voyages, emphasizing the need for careful resource management, strategic partnerships, and reconnaissance before attempting permanent colonization of distant lands. The knowledge of Vinland spread gradually, preserved in oral traditions and written sagas. Storytellers described the lush forests, flowing rivers, and expansive meadows with reverence, blending factual observations with narrative embellishments that emphasized both wonder and caution. These stories provided a cultural bridge between generations, transmitting not only geographic information, but also practical strategies for survival, trade, and diplomacy. Through these narratives, Vinland became more than a place. It became a lesson in leadership, decision-making, and the limits of human endeavor. For the younger generation of Norsemen, Vinland represented both aspiration and example. Sons and daughters grew up with tales of men crossing the Atlantic, facing storms, navigating by stars, and encountering foreign peoples. The voyages demonstrated that courage and skill could overcome the vastness of the sea, yet also that prudence was essential to ensure survival. This duality instilled a nuanced understanding of exploration, Ambition must be balanced by preparation, bravery tempered by wisdom, and curiosity guided by respect for those already inhabiting the land. Vinland also had practical repercussions for trade and resource distribution. Timber harvested from its forests was transported back to Greenland, alleviating a chronic shortage that had previously hindered construction and heating. Grapes and other wild fruits offered new agricultural possibilities, inspiring experimentation in cultivation and consumption. Even small quantities of Vinland's resources were treated as treasures, symbolizing the potential of lands beyond the horizon. Traders, artisans and settlers alike came to view the Atlantic not as a barrier, but as a conduit for goods, ideas and opportunities, reshaping economic patterns in the North Atlantic. The Skræling's presence in Vinland left a lasting impression on Norse approaches to cross-cultural interaction. Early encounters, initially marked by cautious exchanges of gifts and goods, evolved into conflict due to misunderstandings, fear, and differing concepts of property and territory. From these experiences, Norsemen learned that survival and prosperity in foreign lands required more than weapons and skill. It required diplomacy, observation, and cultural sensitivity. These lessons became embedded in the Norse psyche, influencing how future generations approached indigenous populations in subsequent explorations, fostering strategies that combined respect with readiness. The sagas detailing Vinland captured these lessons in a manner that was both educational and inspirational. By weaving accounts of natural abundance, human conflict, and logistical ingenuity, the Greenlander's Saga and the Saga of Eric the Red offered models for leadership, resource allocation, and communal cooperation. These narratives emphasize the necessity of vigilance, the consequences of overreach, and the importance of measured risk-taking, ensuring that the story of Vinland would inform practical decision-making in Greenlandic and Icelandic society for generations. Beyond the immediate Norse world, Vinland's story would later resonate with explorers and historians across Europe. Though largely unknown outside Scandinavia in the medieval period, the tale eventually challenged assumptions about the limits of the Atlantic and the possibility of lands beyond the western horizon. Vinland became a conceptual precursor to the Age of Discovery, illustrating that transoceanic travel was feasible long before Columbus, and that human ambition, skill, and adaptability could extend the known world. This realization, though delayed in broader European consciousness, underscored the significance of Norse seafaring achievements. Vinland's duality, richness tempered by danger, provided a narrative framework that combined adventure with prudence. It showed that even the most fertile lands could not guarantee security or permanence without careful planning, sufficient numbers, and local knowledge. The Norse approach to Vinland, blending bold exploration with strategic retreat, reflected a sophisticated understanding of the balance between opportunity and risk, a mindset that would define successful long-distance exploration for centuries. The voyage underscored the principle that discovery is inseparable from responsibility. Every step into unknown lands requires consideration of the people, resources, and challenges encountered. The Atlantic voyages and the knowledge of Vinland also shaped the Norse identity as a seafaring people. Their reputation for endurance, innovation, and courage was reinforced through these stories, which highlighted both the practical and moral dimensions of exploration. The narrative of Vinland demonstrated that Norsemen were not mere raiders or settlers, but also skilled navigators, astute observers of natural phenomena, and pragmatic decision-makers capable of evaluating the feasibility of settlements and trade ventures. This multifaceted identity enhanced cohesion and pride within Norse communities, influencing cultural norms, leadership structures, and educational practices. Vinland's legacy extended into imagination, scholarship, and oral tradition. The sagas, although written in later centuries, preserved the memory of landscapes, resources, and human interactions in vivid detail. These records provided future explorers and historians with insight into the capacities and limitations of early transatlantic ventures. Maps, narratives, and anecdotal knowledge accumulated over generations, creating a conceptual map of possibility that informed both navigation and the broader understanding of the North Atlantic world. The story of Vinland became a lens through which Norse society interpreted both ambition and caution. Ultimately, Vinland represented the intersection of courage, skill, and prudence. Leif Ericson's expedition illustrated that exploration required not only physical endurance and navigational expertise, but also foresight, diplomacy, and adaptability. The Norse experience in Vinland highlighted the complexity of interacting with foreign peoples, the necessity of evaluating resources strategically, and the wisdom of recognizing when to retreat in the face of insurmountable odds. Through the sagas, these lessons were transmitted across generations, shaping the Norse approach to exploration, settlement, and the wider Atlantic world. Part 14 concludes with a reflection on Vinland as a conceptual and practical legacy, a narrative of discovery tempered by reality, an illustration of opportunity intertwined with caution, and a testament to the Norse capacity for resilience, adaptation, and imaginative foresight. Its enduring influence informed not only the practicalities of seafaring and settlement, but also the cultural, moral, and intellectual frameworks that guided Norse society for centuries. As Leif Ericson and his men set sail from Vinland, the Atlantic stretched endlessly before them, a vast corridor connecting the New World to the familiar shores of Greenland and Iceland. Each wave and gust of wind carried not only their physical burden of timber, grapes, and provisions, but also the intangible weight of experience, memory, and reflection. The voyage back was quieter than the westward journey. The sense of anticipation that had driven them to seek new lands had been replaced by contemplation of what they had discovered, what had been lost, and what might yet be gained in the future. The return journey required meticulous planning. Navigation remained as crucial as ever. Without maps, the Norse relied on the sun, stars, the flight patterns of birds, and the subtle shifts in the color and smell of the sea to guide them home. The Nar, laden with its precious cargo, responded differently to the waves, and the men adapted their techniques accordingly. Every member of the crew, seasoned by the trials of Vinland, was attuned to the rhythm of the Atlantic, their movements synchronized in a dance that combined instinct with learned skill. Throughout the journey, Leif encouraged his men to reflect on the lessons of Vinland. He reminded them that discovery was only one component of exploration. Understanding the land, its resources, and its people was equally vital. The encounters with the Skraelings, both cooperative and confrontational, provided enduring lessons in diplomacy, cultural observation, and strategic retreat. The Norsemen recognized that the Atlantic was not a blank slate, but a space already inhabited, and that the success of future ventures would depend upon careful negotiation and respect for existing populations. The sagas suggest that during this westward voyage, conversations aboard the Nar were both reflective and practical. Men shared insights about the landscapes they had traversed, debating which areas held the most promise for future exploration, which rivers teemed with fish, and which forests could provide timber for generations. They discussed the limits of their current knowledge, acknowledging that even weeks of exploration had revealed only a fraction of Vinland's vast potential. These exchanges fostered a collective memory that would shape Norse understanding of the Atlantic for years to come. Physical challenges remained. The Nar's hull, though sturdy, endured the relentless assault of the sea. Storms tested their seamanship, while the cold North Atlantic winds reminded them that even the return journey demanded vigilance. Provisions had to be rationed carefully, water stored and maintained to prevent spoilage, and the crew's health monitored to ensure that the voyage concluded without unnecessary loss. These practical considerations underscored a fundamental lesson of Norse exploration. Success depended not only on bravery and ambition, but also on discipline, preparation, and the capacity to endure hardship. As Greenland's coastline appeared on the horizon, a sense of relief mingled with pride and anticipation. The men had crossed the Atlantic, set foot on a new continent, and returned with evidence of their accomplishments. Their arrival brought not only resources, but also stories that would captivate the imaginations of their communities. Grapes, timber, and tales of rivers teeming with fish became tangible proof of lands beyond the familiar northern territories. For Greenlanders and Icelanders alike, these accounts expanded the boundaries of the known world, challenging assumptions and inspiring dreams of future ventures. Upon returning to Greenland, Leif and his crew were greeted with curiosity and awe. The sagas describe the enthusiasm with which neighbors, family, and fellow settlers listened to tales of Vinland. Each account was a mosaic of observation, experience, and interpretation. The dense forests, the wild grapes, the abundance of game, and the encounters with the Skraelings. These narratives reinforced social cohesion as communities shared in the triumphs and challenges of distant kin. They became part of the collective consciousness, shaping perceptions of what lay beyond familiar horizons and inspiring a new generation to value exploration, adaptability, and courage. The return journey also had lasting psychological and cultural impacts. Crew members reflected on their experiences in ways that influenced both personal identity and communal memory. The hardships of Vinland, the skirmishes, the uncertainty, the necessity of vigilance fostered resilience, while the land's bounty inspired hope and imagination. These dualities, risk and reward, danger and abundance, became embedded in Norse understanding of the Atlantic world. For the men who had voyaged, Vinland was more than a physical place. It was a concept that represented the potential for discovery, the limits of human control, and the rewards of skillful adaptation. Leif Ericson, as the leader, understood that Vinland's greatest value might lie not in immediate settlement, but in knowledge and precedent. By demonstrating that the Atlantic could be crossed successfully and that fertile lands lay beyond Greenland, he set a model for strategic exploration. He balanced the allure of expansion with the realities of limited manpower, hostile encounters, and logistical challenges. This pragmatic approach influenced both contemporaries and future generations, illustrating that leadership in exploration required a combination of vision, judgment, and the willingness to recognize when to retreat. The sagas preserve these lessons in enduring form. They detail not only the geography and resources of Vinland, but also the human experiences, decisions, and reflections that shaped the expedition. Through storytelling, the Norse encoded practical knowledge, navigation techniques, survival strategies, and approaches to indigenous interaction, while also imparting cultural values of prudence, courage, and adaptability. The return journey became a narrative bridge, linking the unknown lands of Vinland to the social and intellectual frameworks of Greenland and Iceland, ensuring that the voyage informed broader Norse consciousness. In a broader historical context, Vinland's legacy contributed to an evolving understanding of the Atlantic as a space of possibility. The Norse voyages challenged the notion of fixed boundaries, demonstrating that human initiative could extend across oceans. They highlighted the interplay between environment, human skill, and cultural interaction, offering insights that would inform later transatlantic explorations. Though the immediate impact on European geography and colonization was limited, Vinland's story remained a touchstone for the potential of the Atlantic world, preserved in saga, memory, and, eventually, archaeological evidence. Part 15 concludes with the recognition that return voyages are as critical to exploration as initial discovery. The Atlantic had delivered the Norse to Vinland, and it carried them home with more than physical goods. It carried lessons, reflections, and a broader understanding of human potential. Leif Ericson's journey emphasized that knowledge, experience, and prudence, transmitted through stories and action, were essential components of exploration. The Atlantic became a teacher as much as a pathway, and Vinland's memory endured as a testament to the balance of ambition, caution, and resilience.